Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. In today's episode, I talk with my friend Ahmad Kamal. Ahmad is an economics graduate from the University of Nottingham Malaysia and currently works in a consulting firm in Malaysia. In this episode, we talk about a lot of things. I ask him a lot about the beginnings of working life and kind of how he feels about it and what he thinks about it. And then it goes more towards the past, and I ask him about his experiences being a Muslim in an international school. It goes a bit into the study of philosophy as a Muslim and the potential pros and cons of it. And then we talk a lot about what it's like to actually belong somewhere and to be yourself. For example, like in university, we have a lot more independence to kind of find our own crowd, which we may not necessarily have had in international school. Ahmed fascinates me by the sheer number of languages that he's learned. He knows English, Arabic, Malay, Japanese, Russian, however many else. And how learning a language is really just a form of appreciation for a country's culture. We end by talking a bit about investments, which I find really interesting. Alright, without further ado, here's my good friend Ahmad Kamal. We talked about it a little when we met up last Saturday, but walk me through it again. What do you actually do in your job at the moment?
So right now I'm working in a consulting company, one of the top major consulting companies in the world right now. And within my specific field of consulting, we do a specific particular consulting called technology consulting. So what is consulting first and foremost is that we are people who are hired by major corporations around the world to help improve their company strategies and to implement measures to help drive sales, reduce costs, improve their human capital resources, and basically make their company more successful at the end of the day. We are not part of their company, but we take on projects to help improve those companies. So that's in essence, what consultants do in general. Technology consultants do that from the technology standpoint by implementing things like data adoption technologies, introducing things like data warehousing, cloud computing, and ways to adopt artificial intelligence and machine learning into their systems.
That's interesting because I know personally, like from your degree, you weren't really involved in any of those things. So how was that transition like?
It's quite a drastic transition, to be fair. I mean, it wasn't like when I was in university, I actively thought about, oh, I'm definitely going to become a consultant. It was like I was exploring different sort of scenarios. Maybe I could become this, maybe I could become that, like from my degree, because my degree is quite broad, right? Because people coming out of economics, because I take economics and international economics from my university, 3-year degree, and it's a BSc. So it's not exactly so industry oriented as, let's say, a finance degree where you also get an accounting certification that is recognized, or an engineering degree that can get recognized as well by the Chartered Engineers Board. In economics, we don't really have something like that. So the purpose of getting an economics degree is a little bit limited and general at the same time. So what one can do with an economics degree is go down the academic route. And that was what I also explored as some of my options, is to become an academician under the economics stream, to become basically a researcher. But then, given some thought over and over again, I decided not to pursue that path simply because of the time that it will take and the return on investment. I believe coming out from and having seen the research environment from an outsider's point of view, it isn't exactly worth it for me to invest my time in doing economics research. So I decided, what are my other options as an economics graduate to join the job market. And I should know about the job market since I'm from economics. So there are many options. There's banking, investment banking, consulting, sales, marketing, but they're not necessarily so directly related to my degree in the first place. So I knew that from the start, my economics degree puts me at a slight disadvantage because my degree is so broad that I don't really have that industry-centric point of view going into any of these industries.
I was gonna ask you, like, what was your mindset going into economics? Did you already know that it's broader than a lot of the other specializations, and like it might impact you career-wise in that way?
Well, I kind of entered economics with an empty cup. I didn't really have much of an expectation of the impact it will have on my career, other than that it is still a valuable degree to have, and career-wise, I can still make a lot out of it. It's one of the degrees that I think can benefit me more from the humanities, because people often talk about how people coming out from the humanities stream being less employable than the people from the STEM sciences degrees. And there is some truth in that. Many people who do take the humanities stream take degrees such as the arts and languages, which are not necessarily demanded in the job market as the STEM subjects graduates are. So I knew that there is value in my degree, but I didn't really think about specifically what I wanted to become going into the degree. I was still a little vague on that aspect, just getting into first year.
Did you just know that it was something you were interested in, and that's why you started it?
Definitely. It was definitely something that I wanted to do as a degree because of my IBs. So I took an IB diploma prior to entering university for 2 years in lieu of A-levels, because decided to take that opportunity to also study abroad with my family who were living in Egypt at the time. So I had the chance to go to international school and learn from the environment that I live in Egypt, pick up the language there as well alongside, and experience how life would be like. And I think IB really opened that whole new perspective on, economics and other subjects that I took alongside it.
Was it IB in specific, or just I guess sixth form education really it really provides a level of depth that people doing IGCSEs beforehand just haven't really experienced.
Definitely.
So maybe it might not be specific to IB. Maybe you would have felt the same way doing A-levels, but IB and A-levels is a whole different discussion to have. Yeah. I don't have experience in IB other than the fact that it's like I guess the biggest selling point that I heard was like it's gonna make you a more holistic person.
Yeah, about that. It's holistic or not holistic, right? I do believe that sense of holisticness comes down to the individual, because you can be in an IB, but you can feel like IB is a drag and you're forced to take three or four additional subjects just to complete it, and it's forced down your throat, and you'd be struggling and be feeling tortured going through the IB system. And it doesn't help you become more holistic. It just helps you become more bitter as a person.
I remember you had some ill feelings towards theory of knowledge.
I mean, theory of knowledge in theory is a good subject to learn, but when something is just too based upon philosophy and it becomes really muddy and subjective, grading something like that would be also very muddy and subjective. And frankly, I am not in favor of having those subjects being graded in the first place. So I actually got quite a low mark for my TOK, but it also comes down to the fact that I disliked TOK in the first place, and I didn't put as much effort to it as all the other more grounded subjects that are more tangible for me to understand.
To that point, I mean, someone could easily say, like, if you're going to make an argument whether, grading something is based on subjectivity, then, something like an essay from English language or English literature can very well take that criticism as well. Or maybe even something like economics. Like, what do you think about that?
Well, I did take English language and literature in IB, and I do believe there is a room for subjectivity in education, especially when we don't want everything to be so rigid and that all the students would learn in a rote memorization style. That's actually, that would be killing creativity in the first place. But the problem, I believe, with theory of knowledge is that you're presented with a set of philosophies and principles and guidelines of how the system is designed to be somehow, and that we are meant to question every set of knowledge that we have, and that I believe that does not necessarily align with my values, especially, and it conflicts with my set of beliefs, the foundational beliefs that I have, especially as a Muslim, that you cannot be questioning each and every thing in life and make your own value judgments based on that. Some things are just truth by default. And that's what I believe about religion and religious knowledge. But in TOK, the religious knowledge is valid to be questioned too. And this is the problematic part that I have with TOK, that can lead someone to a devout Muslim especially, to lead that person to questioning his faith and lead him, na'udhu billah, astray. So everything that I can understand teaching people to take everything with a grain of salt, but one should not be taught to become so overly cynical of the world around them. And that's what I think is the downside of TOK that I wholeheartedly disagree with.
Do you have any examples in mind when you say there are some things that go against your values when it comes to content in TOK?
For example, questioning whether the validity of religious texts and using faith as a way of knowing. We call it there are many methods of us deriving knowledge according to TOK, and one of them is faith. And that I don't remember very much of it, but faith is one of those ways of knowing that we were taught that it's just we believe it as it is. It is not something that is necessarily rational. And there's a lot of discussion back in my school about whether faith and faith-based knowledge is even real knowledge at all. So there was a lot of discussion of recognizing whether the Quran is valid or the Bible is valid as a source of knowledge. And the problem with that is that you're putting all religions under scrutiny, and you're also not, it's as if like the way that it was presented to me, at least in the class, is like it's not a valid way of knowing. It's not like a valid thing to believe in. It's just believe in something that without any basis other than it is because what Allah told me and what the Prophet has taught me is just a little bit problematic in that sense. Yeah.
That's quite interesting because
and
finish your thought.
So in the general sense of it, this is what I feel in terms of my life growing up as someone who has always been in international school, exposed to people from many different cultures and many different religions and belief systems and ethnicities, that you are often taught in an environment where sometimes your beliefs can be subtly be put aside and disregarded, and
You mean
another
religious,
set of beliefs. Religious
mean-
beliefs could be an example of it, but I could also talk about it from a cultural standpoint and how some aspects of culture is not as respected in an international school setting. So growing up, I just felt like there is always like a clash of identities and a war of identities that can go on within myself. The difference between myself in the school and the myself at home can be very jarring as well, because of the different people that I have to interact with on a daily basis.
That's quite interesting, because I can see where you're coming from in terms of studying philosophy academically, if not done with proper care and proper, I don't know what's the word, observation, observiveness. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like being careful, basically. There's a potential that it might take people on the wrong path, which is why which is quite interesting, because I am someone that does have an interest in philosophy, and I think to kind of say that Islam does not agree with philosophy is a bit simplistic in a way, because if you do look into the scholars' work, like someone like Ibn Taymiyyah, for example, if you look at what he has done, a lot of his work we would describe as philosophy, and it seems like what they had a contention towards is philosophy that is against is specifically called kalam, right? The philosophy of the West that does not hold the principles that we do as Muslims. So I think there is some leeway to be had for people that do want to look into philosophy, as long as they kind of like I said, they approach it carefully, and they have a firm aqidah. And I asked Walid Basuni this personally as well. It's like, just don't go into it with an open heart and accepting everything that you come from. But I also think it goes. Another thing to add is, like, for me personally, it did kind of, I started down this rabbit hole maybe like 2 years ago, watching some like Muhammad Hijab videos, and it was really quite profound to me that Islam really did have an intellectual heritage that was so rich and so strong, even in terms of the philosophical, in terms of debating on philosophical terms. It was, that to me was really encouraging, because before that I've always been like, oh, philosophy, this is probably something my parents told me, but philosophy is something that people that think too much, they don't know what they're doing. So it was actually quite encouraging to me, and I think that if done properly, it can actually help boost your iman rather than take it down. What do you think?
Yeah. No, I totally agree with your points there, actually, because in terms of the dynamics of so-called Islamic philosophy, it's a grounded sort of philosophy that is based on our theology, our sources of theology, which is the Quran and the Sunnah, and we believe that to be the absolute truth. And the difference between for us to make philosophical arguments with that and having our philosophical worldview based around that, and having a firm aqidah with that is what it's something that is that can be very, very hard for someone, a teenager in an international school setting would have, and this is because they are not being acculturated in that environment, because they are being acculturated in an environment where the Western philosophy or the Western mindset, the liberal mindset, is dominant, and they do not necessarily have the knowledge, the factual knowledge to, or the access to those knowledge to make those value judgments or those philosophical judgments that are in line with Islam. So this is where the point I'm trying to make is that it's not that I'm attacking philosophy in general, but rather I could be saying that I'm making the argument that perhaps international schools, especially international schools in the Muslim world, need to be more culturally aware and more culturally accepting of the environment that they are based in and they're located in, and become more accepting of the values and accept them as valid as the values that they have and they are promoting.
In terms of you personally, what would that have looked like for you in during your time in international school? Like that sort, like what would you have wanted practically?
I would have loved if the idea of being a practicing Muslim isn't viewed as to be so jarring, because growing up, right, as someone with fairly religious background, upbringing especially, it can be very jarring to find out that your Muslim classmates don't actually pray, or that your Muslim friends don't keep halal food, don't eat halal food, or that your Muslim friends drink. And that puts Muslims who do observe the commandments, those who do try to strive towards what is considered correct, in a difficult position, because now you can't go out and tell them directly in their face that you're a bad person because you do not, pray, or you do not wear hijab, that sort of thing. And it's that sort of awareness that, I believe there's a sort of misrepresentation that is happening in the background, that somehow saying that it's problematic to be unapologetically Muslim. And sometimes I don't feel welcome in that circle, coming out with a very open way of expressing my Muslimness.
That's a funny way to put it.
But it's true. I mean, I feel this, especially as I grew older, and the conversation to be even more and more awkward. You can't really just open up a discussion and have a frank discussion about religion, and for it to not become some sort of argument with the person. And you don't have that much knowledge, that person also doesn't have that much knowledge, but we start arguing because we disagree on religious foundations, and and that brings more antagonism towards people. So a lot of the time I end up putting aside religion altogether and just create a persona of myself that is a lot more secular, and sometimes that betrays my true identity, and I didn't like that.
Was that what you had to kind of exhibit during your times at international school, rather than, is that different from the time from your university career?
I think back in international school, I did appear to be someone else, or I didn't try to be so overtly practicing. And until, I suppose, as I grew older, I was able to be very selective on what I can and cannot express. But once I was in university, I felt like it's okay. It's totally acceptable to be who I am and to express myself in the way that I feel comfortable in. So in university, you could do that very freely. There would be days when I can come into class wearing baju Melayu, or come to class wearing a thobe and igal and the whole
Yeah.
ghutra thing. And because it's a Friday and I know that I'm going to go to the mosque that day. So I felt more confident expressing my Muslimness in university than I was back in school. And it's just because of the environment that I was in. It's not necessarily my friends or my classmates that are creating that sort of unaccepting
Ouch.
environment. It's not that. It's basically the way that the ethics and the ethos of the school is that you cannot really act in a certain way and for it openly. And there's just maybe that's just my feeling. Maybe other people feel very differently. But yeah, it's more culturally acceptable to reject religiosity than to accept religiosity in this modern day and age anyway.
It seems, yeah. It seems like there is kind of a lack of that recently. It's definitely, especially it's difficult to start those conversations with people. Well, not even start, but like to kind of bring religion into a conversation. Say a friend that you've had for like a month or two, like
Yeah,
it's always in like you hesitate to bring it up. Well, whereas I mean, I don't think you really should, because you're like, it's basically, it's not even a part of you, it's most of who you are, isn't it? So it's the way I like to do it is like kind of like know people for a month or two first, know that, have them have like a positive impression of me, and then slowly bring Islam into it. And I think that's that's worked for me. As I don't know if I would call it da'wah per se, but it's like, it's a da'wah by action after all, right?
dawah by action is definitely dawah.
Yeah.
I think dawah by action is very effective in this modern day and age where too many people are talking at once, but actions aren't necessarily being shown. So a lot of people are saying that, Islam is the religion of peace, yet you see certain parts of the internet where you look at the comment section, the Muslims would be the ones that are most vocal at criticizing someone or something in a very hostile way. So you're saying one thing, but the actions don't reflect it. So this is where I believe that in this modern day and age, actions are becoming more and more important as a means of dawah, especially.
How do you respond to someone? Because just extending that example, right? I've had these discussions with my friend Jakob, for example, where there is a disconnect between theory and action, and then they bring up the example of the Middle East. If the most unrest civilly is in the Middle East. Like, if you're supposed to have the truth, how do you kind of square those two ideas? So how do you respond in those situations?
Keep in mind that only 19% of Muslims around the world are Arabs.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I know as much as people often associate Arabs with Islam and the Arab world and the Middle East, it makes sense why people do that. It's because the center of the Islamic civilization has always been the Middle East. And people still look to the Middle East as a source of inspiration for their religious faith as Muslims. But the problem the problems in the Middle East is so complex. It has layers of political history, socio-economic history that often has nothing to do with Islam. And a lot of people oversimplify the complex social structures that exist in the Middle East and just write it off as Muslims oppressing minorities or Muslims fighting each other between Sunnis and Shias, which is not necessarily 100% true, you know? And this simplistic view is shared by not just Europeans, Westerners, Southeast Asians, East Asians, or it's shared by so many people around the world. Even the Arabs themselves don't necessarily have a clear picture of what's going on. And because the land area is so big. So to put it in a nutshell, right? Islam has the solution to many of the problems we have in the world. In fact, it can be the best solution, and I believe it to be so, but the problems are not necessarily even linked to Islam. And whatever Muslims do, they are doing it as mistakes made by human beings, and they're not representative of Islam as a religion.
But that's a really difficult idea to get across to people, because you would need to know, you need to have like a whole argument ready, like in terms of like the depth of knowledge you need to have, for example, to kind of explain female oppression in areas like Pakistan or Afghanistan, and so that takes a lot of work.
It is, and it's not fair, especially for. I don't believe it's a fair question to ask a regular layman Muslim at the end of the day, because you'd be asking someone, let's say you're asking a Moroccan about female oppression or oppression of certain minority groups by Muslim majority countries that has nothing to do with where he comes from, has nothing to do with Morocco, and has nothing to do with his language, his cultures. The only link is his religion, and they're separated by miles and miles and miles of distance. And that's the problem. A lot of people are just stereotyping Muslims as if they're one homogeneous bunch of people, when we're already very diverse among themselves, very unique problems in different localities.
All right, wait. I wanted to get back to your. Work for a bit. Do you feel like, kind of in the social environment of work? I guess you've been working for a year now, right? And so it's presented kind of like a different social environment compared to whether it be high school or university. Do you feel like it's been more true to who you are, as in you are able to present yourself in the way that you're content being, or how has it been? In terms of like in university, you were more able to do that. How does it compare?
Yeah. So at work, I believe that my company is very, very inclusive in terms of diversity. They really do hold true to their mantra of, inclusivity of people from very diverse backgrounds. And I work in a very multi-ethnic, multinational environment. I have people from very varying ethnicities, varying nationalities, and expressing my faith is very socially acceptable, in a sense that I can put up certain. I can say that I can't do certain things, and they are okay and they are accepting of that fact, and brush it off as, they don't take it to heart.
Could that be to do just because of the fact that people are much more mature, like at that stage?
That's true.
Compared to high
That
school?
is true. That is true too. People are much more mature. People are much more aware and culturally aware of the fact that Malaysia is a multi-ethnic country, a multiracial country with many different religious beliefs, and they are also keen to learn about others in terms of their religious practices also. And that what I really, really, really do love about working in our teams here in my company is that you'd have people who not just accept that, for example, that I won't go to corporate dinners where alcohol is served, so I would skip out on those dinners. They actually, more than one occasion, have asked me for restaurant recommendations to have their dinner in a place that does not serve alcohol. And
just to include you.
Yeah, and I felt really, really touched by this. And it really does show that this is a very great environment to be working in. People are just so accepting of each other, and it's very rare to find such a cohesive sort of environment in this modern day and age. I feel like there's too much negativity out there, and you'd hear stories in the newspapers about how people are not allowed to wear hijab at work and how people are not allowed to pray at work. But I can manage to do all those things and more. And
Sorry, finish your thought.
And it's really a blessing from Allah that, especially because we live in Malaysia, that not just because Malaysia is a Muslim majority country or anything like that, but the acceptance among the people is there. There's always been peace, stability, and acceptance among the different people here, and we should really value that and try to preserve that as much as possible.
Did you, going back to your university a bit, did you finish your degree kind of having in mind that you wanted to work in this sort of environment, or did you already know that you wanted to work maybe in a multinational company where inclusivity was a big factor?
I believe I wanted to work in a multinational company from the start because I wanted that international exposure and that brand name compared to if I would be working in the public sector. The problem with the public sector is that although it's a very secure form of employment, it's very limiting in a sense that moving up the corporate ladder will take a long time. You'll be only exposed to working within people mostly from one ethnic group, and once you stay too long in the public sector, you'll end up being stuck in the public sector. There's not much of a leeway for you to move on to other industries in the private sector. It wasn't really much to do with inclusivity or diversity, but the motivating factor are those three. And the fourth arguably would be just pay.
Yeah.
Well,
I get that. And then you ended up, I love it. I mean, yeah, you obviously have had a good kind of self-awareness in terms of what you want, in terms of who you are, as we've been speaking. So it's really quite, uplifting to hear. I mean, I just like listening to people. But in any case, did you have any idea? Did you even have consulting like as a potential career option once you left university, or was it just like, I'm just gonna try it out, see what happens?
Exactly that. I was willing to give it a try. I did not know much about consulting or the many different positions that I ended up applying for, whether it was consulting, sales, marketing. I wanted to give everything a try. Why? Because, mate, I graduated when I was only 21 years old.
Bro, I'm going to be that old and I don't even have a job yet. Well, I'm going to be 22 when I graduate. So,
Yeah. So when I'm putting age as a factor, I have so much opportunity to learn. It doesn't really matter what industry I end up in, as long as I get that experience, that knowledge of the industry, of the corporate environment. It really would add value to me, because the problem with university is that you are still very much sheltered in the way that you interact with the outside world. There's not much things you have to worry about as a university student. unlike when you're actually a working adult, where you have to worry about taxes, have to worry about expenses, about debt,
Budgeting,
maintenance, budgeting and work-life balance and mental health. There's so many things you have to manage individually as an adult that you would have already relegated all of those responsibilities to your parents as a university student still.
Yeah.
So you, as university students, you are extremely lucky to still be in that very, very sheltered, but in a positive way. I'm not saying sheltered in a condescending way or anything, but sheltered means that you have the opportunities and the avenues to pursue your interest, to work on improving your skills and spend time doing things that you enjoy that you would no longer get to do once you are a working adult. So
here's an interesting question that I've posed to a couple of people that have been on the podcast. Do you feel like you've gotten everything that you wanted out of university at the end of it, or are there things that you look back on and I don't like the word regret is heavy, but are there things that you wish you would have done differently? What are they, or what if there are any?
Sometimes I do wish that I took a different degree.
Okay. Because, the whole different course.
I know it's a whole different kind of worms there, but there are times when I felt like this economics degree, is it really as useful as it could have been, like compared to especially things like engineering or computer science, where for some reason, and this is a point that I always use to annoy people from the engineering school, is that you guys graduate and then end up taking our jobs in the humanities. You guys go into business, into marketing, into finance, into investment. And we're like, what about us? You guys have the engineering background, yet you're entering our jobs. What's left for us? So I felt that at times, my economics degree is not as useful as it could have been. But then I think again and tell myself, wait, if it weren't for my economics degree, would I still get this job? If it weren't for my economics degree, would I have these certain skills, these analytical skills, or these specific critical thinking skills or problem-solving skills that allowed me to be where I am now? So that's why regret is toxic in that sense. You shouldn't really be regretting these decisions that Allah has already decreed upon you before you were born and end up being the choices that you made. So that's one thing. The second thing that you could say that I wish I'd done more is my language study, which did not go as I planned in university simply because of my degree. Again, because the nature of my degree took up so much of my time that I could not dedicate the proper focus that I wanted to formally study Japanese within Nottingham University.
What did you think that you could do? Did you think that you had enough time to be able to do it on the side?
At that time, when I entered Nottingham, one of the driving motivators of me joining Nottingham was its Japanese language program, and that I could do Japanese as an audited subject alongside my economics. However, that didn't really turn out well in the second year, and it turned out even worse for the third year because of the workload that I keep getting from the economics school. So I had to sacrifice classes, I had to sacrifice homework, and ended up falling behind and not even and deciding to terminate my Japanese studies altogether. And I think that these are one of the things. Japanese study is one of the things that I wish I could have done more. But looking back, it's fine, because the trade-off would have been that I would have gotten lower grades in economics, which is the main focus of my university studies.
I wanna get back to languages, but I'm gonna put it on hold for the moment because I'm still interested in your job. Because someone that currently isn't working and is still thinking about it. Firstly, why did you not decide to pursue, say a postgraduate degree, and what made you want to go straight into working? Is that something that you'd already settled in your mind, or what was your thought process behind that?
Well, money is a motivating factor.
Yes, it is.
I mean, and let's be frank, right? It's very easy to say. It's very easy to say, I want to follow my passion. I really enjoy my subject, and I want to, do further study on this because it's so fascinating. But, there's the aspect where, are your parents willing to fund your master's degree? If they aren't, are you able to get a scholarship? If you can't, are you able to fund this yourself? And putting all of these arguments in succession, I brought up a fourth argument, which is, do you even need a master's degree at all? And since I decided to not go down the academic route anyway, I thought to myself, why bother with an economics degree right after an economics degree, an MSc in economics? Granted, I could take something else aside from economics, but as someone from economics, going to a completely different field of study is pretty difficult. Like, you're only limited to within the business and economics fields of study as a postgraduate degree. And with MBAs, just want to mention MBAs because you may think that, I could just do an MBA after graduation. MBAs are not so useful for a university graduate with no working experience. They are usually designed and tailored towards people who are working professionals, who have some years of experience working, and that they want to improve their skills, they want to improve their knowledge of the corporate environment that they are already in. So that is why many universities actually put working experience as a condition to joining their MBA program, including the University of Nottingham, which states 2 years of working experience in any industry. So again, that's why I decided not to pursue a master's degree yet. Doesn't mean that I won't pursue a master's degree at all. I am thinking of whether, am I going to do MBA or not? But that also depends on what it is that I want to do as a consultant within this company, how I want to progress within this company career-wise, how I decide to progress career-wise out after this company, and how the master's degree would actually benefit me in terms of my skills and my pay.
What do you say to people that this is something that I commonly hear and something my parents have said as well, where, having a master's degree does kind of increase your employability? What did you think about that?
It really does depend. Employability in what industry? I can't speak much for the engineering sector because it's not where I'm from, but at least in the corporate world, having an MBA from a reputable, well-known university does bump up your salary quite a bit and bump up your rank as well within the company.
Well, I don't understand how that works. Does that mean that you can get to higher levels, or there's a different career path? There's a different path for you in the company in terms of someone that has an MBA and someone that doesn't?
Well, there could be a different career path for you. You could be more in the corporate strategy sort of department, and you can be focusing on doing consulting based on that, or that other than consulting, you could just be in working within as a manager of projects or as a manager of corporate decision making within the company. But in terms of necessarily, like, if you get a master's degree, let's say, if it's not an MBA and you just have a master's degree in, let's say, computer science, that will benefit you, no doubt. But it won't necessarily be a differentiator if the person with a bachelor's degree is better at coding than you, for example, or better at implementation than you and have better results. So it is variable. It's not necessarily the panacea to financial success.
There's a fancy word you used. I don't hear. I've never heard it. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say it unironically.
Well, I thought I used it ironically.
Okay, fine. In terms of your current job, what is your mindset when it comes to it, in the sense that what do you view your job as? Like, what's the intention that you have every time you go into a job? Is it just a stepping stone? Are you just thinking about it in terms of something that allows you to gain new skills, or is it maybe just something that allows you to save money for, a different career path? So yeah, I feel like I'm just asking because I feel like I would have that sort of, what am I getting from this job when I do start working, and it needs to be very clear to me. For example, in my internship, I know what I'm getting. It's not something that I particularly maybe value very much, or I think I've gotten everything that I can get, but at least I have that, clear in my mind. So to you, what do you think you're getting currently?
Well, that is a very, very deep question. I don't really think about it very often, but when I do think about it, especially when it comes to intention, I think first and foremost as a Muslim, in my intention, doing anything right, for this to become something that will benefit my akhirah, my hereafter, is to have that intention that I'm doing this as an ibadah, as a way to please Allah. So I'd like to think of my work as something that can work towards my akhirah in some way or another. Whether those ways, I can describe them, in whether it's in terms of improving my skills and whatnot. But at the end of the day, they should benefit me to become a better Muslim, to benefit other people from the work that I have carried out, and gain good deeds because of that. So in terms of the individual impact that it would have on me, to have that intention fixed, is that I want to gain those skills, those skills that I told you about, like that are very essential in a technical field like mine, is things like programming, things like cloud computing, and digital implementation and design. Those things are not natural to me. I have to learn it from scratch. I didn't learn them in economics class. So I need to use this work environment as an opportunity for me to learn all those things, because they're giving me free resources for it. And I could really, really become an expert in this. Exactly. It's like they have a lot of, I have so many opportunities to improve and to reorient myself, because I don't necessarily view myself as just an economist. And I would hate to just become that, because economics is not all that I do, and it's not all that I like in life. I want to become more. I want to become specialized in something that is ultimately going to be the future of the world, and technology is the way. So that's one aspect of it. And the other aspect of it is what drives me is the impact that my work is doing to other people. So in consulting, we help companies. But what we forget when we think about companies, we think of all these major, big brand, big name corporations, but we forget about the people working within them and the people working hard to produce things like transaction reports and management reports, and the ones running around to the photocopy machine to to print things out and to prepare stuff for the next meeting. I'd love to think that my work would contribute to lessening certain burden that they face in the company, and to help them, put some of them at ease in the way that they can present their information better, or to help streamline their processes better, and to for them to improve, for their lives to basically improve because of the work that we put into their company. So that's the impact that I'd like to give to other people, especially those people that I eventually develop like a professional working relationship with from the other companies, from the client companies that we work with, So I like to think of it in that way.
Do you have, I know it's turning sort of like into an interview session, but it's just generally, I'm curious. It's like, have you thought about a sort of vision that you want to have of yourself in the future? And has that kind of served to orientate you in some sense with your current decisions that you have to make right now? I know you touched on it a bit, but I'd just like to know, like, maybe 10 years down the line, what do you see yourself as? Because having a vision is something that does orientate yourself, like for me personally as well.
Well, my vision can be a bit changing at times. Like there will be times when I say, I want to become this 10 years down the line, but then in a couple of months, situations change, and then I'll be like, maybe I should become this person. But if I were to summarize all those things that would not change in my overall 10-year down the line vision, is that I want to be very financially able as a Muslim, as a Malaysian, as a person here. And I want to be able to not just provide for myself and my family and raise our family in an Islamic way, but also to be able to create something to impact my community positively. And I have ideas, things like ways to improve education, or ways to improve the economy of a particular area that I live in. But for me to be able to reach those and to make those tangible, I have to be at a better financial position than I am now. So it's all about self-improvement at the moment, and working towards that, and just increasing my savings and doing things that will, make myself more able to achieve those goals in the future, inshallah.
May Allah make it easy for you and raise you in rank, and open all the doors that are necessary for you to be able to carry out your vision, if that is what is best for you. Ameen. Yeah, I think that's beautiful, because a lot of people, they kind of don't have that level of self-awareness when it comes to like what they want to be in 10 years down the line, or even 5 years down the line, or even 2 years down the line. And I think it's really important for someone to have something like that, because it does, like I said, it does help you orientate yourself in terms of, being very directed in what you focus on, and whether, you take a decision and you can assess it based on the fact, does it help me achieve that vision of what I want to be in the future? Does it help me in the sense, does it increase my financial stability? Does it increase my ability to do things? And does it, to use a word that Rudin uses quite a lot too, does it upskill me in a certain way? So yeah, I think yeah, just hearing that from you is it's quite it's respectable. That's the right word, respectable. Um, so yeah, again, may Allah increase you and all that is good.
I mean,
I want to talk about languages a bit because I know it's something that you have personally been very involved with. For one, I'd like to say thank you for listening to my podcast with Flick Hemming. That was encouraging for me. Um, so yeah, tell me about your language. Tell me about your journey with languages.
sure, I'd love to talk about. It's something that I really, really find pleasure expressing to other people, especially my history with languages. I did grow up having Malay as my mother tongue. I grew up with speaking Malay with my family members, and it wasn't until I entered preschool or even primary school when I was properly taught English. And I didn't really feel that my English was at a good level until I entered the international school. So my family and myself, including myself, moved to Oman. And I was primary two of the Malaysian national school system back then. I think that's around 10 years old. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Year two, I think wasn't that 8 or so?
8 years old. Yeah, 8 years old. Correct. And then it was in 2006, sorry. 2006, I lived in Oman for, wow, it's been so long. I'm trying to remember how many years I lived there. 6 years. 6 years I lived there. And growing up, English became a daily part of my life, the school being taught in English and whatnot. But the interesting part about growing up living as an expat, as a Malaysian expat especially, is that I somehow managed to retain my command of Malay language and not let that part of my identity be lost. Because despite that, me using English in school, it doesn't mean that I stopped speaking Malay at home. And I continued to do that. I would go back home every summer, speak Malay with my relatives for the 2 months I stay in Malaysia with family members who do not speak English, and come back to school, and that the cycle goes on and on.
I do admire that because, like, I know personally how hard that is as someone that, has retained it in a sense, but not to the level that you have. And of course, I guess you and I probably know a lot of people that, struggle to even speak a sentence at this point, having similar backgrounds to us.
Yeah, I think that's why I like to raise about the issue of the cultural, the sense of acceptance within the international school environment, where you are being taught that a certain culture or a certain way of thinking is grand, and it is so great. And then what can happen to a budding someone who's very young is that they develop a sense of inferiority towards their own culture and towards their upbringing, and that's why language loss is quite common among expat children growing up, at least for their mother tongues.
Do you feel like that's a lot to do with your own personal resolve to not have that happen to you, or was it something that was more drilled into you by your parents, like more of a dogmatic type of learning?
I think it's a personal resolve, because my parents never forced me to speak Malay at home. They did not. They didn't force me. They continued speaking Malay to me. But let's say if I started speaking more and more English, they wouldn't go against it because they spoke English themselves. But it was for me, it was a marker of my identity to keep speaking Malay to keep speaking Malay, especially to my siblings, even if they are at school. So there'd be times when my teacher would tell me off and tell them, speak English, when I'm speaking to my sister or my younger brother in school in Malay. But I wouldn't, because by default, we don't speak in English to siblings, to family members. We don't speak English. So it was a matter of principle that somehow I developed a sense of cultural over-awareness of myself. And to the extent that I began to feel a very strong attachment to the Jawi script. So that developed while I was in Oman, while I was growing up in Oman, because there was one time when I had to go back to Malaysia. My parents decided to put me in Malaysian school, but because they can't put me in the national school because, rules and, and admission timings and all that, they put me in religious school, Sekolah Agama, where in this school, the primary mode of writing Malay would be the Jawi script, the Arabic script. And, I had to pick up a lot of things very quickly. My Jawi was rusty in the beginning, but then I picked it up and I grew a liking for it. And I began to feel that, this is the original way of writing Malay. I should write Malay like this rather than using the Latin alphabet. So it became a habit for me to write Malay in the Jawi script. And it became something even my parents found a little bit bizarre, because it's something that I keep up to this day, where I would write anything handwritten in Malay, I would write in the Jawi script.
I can tell you that not only your parents found it bizarre, we as your university friends found it quite bizarre as well.
I mean, it's because, that's one thing. It's like, because we really don't see the Jawi script being used on a regular basis at all. It's taught, but it's never being used. And then the other thing is that I go to the further extent of actually texting my mom and dad in the Jawi script.
And posting on your Instagram stories as well.
Exactly, yeah. Because I just, as much as I love the Malay language and I accept the language for what it has become, I felt that writing Malay in the Latin script is kind of like betraying our heritage, and it doesn't represent Malay in a very beautiful way as writing it in the Arabic script does. And I just feel like we need to do more to strengthen and to encourage people to use it. But, for convenience sake, a lot of people just use the Latin script, and that's the end of the story. So
I was going to ask you why you did this, but I think you answered it a bit. And it seems to me like you have a sort of keeping things authentic is almost the best way to honor something. So yeah, I just find that quite interesting. Because it's not something that is commonly heard.
And keeping things authentic is my approach to learning languages too. So say when I was learning Arabic, I did grow up learning Arabic even since Malaysian National School, where Arabic was part of the curriculum. But as I moved to the Arab country, I started learning Arabic in a more formal setting. Like in Oman, not yet, because in Oman, even though I lived in Oman, I only had the opportunity to take Arabic as a foreign language in middle school or lower secondary. So I started taking Arabic there, and I tried my best, but I didn't really pick up Arabic very well because the environment wasn't very conducive, and my level of interest wasn't to that level where I enjoyed it. It was like I took Arabic because there's no other choice. I couldn't really pick up French because I had no basis in it. And there was Spanish, I think, but I don't think it was available for my year group. So it was French or Arabic, and I went for Arabic, and it wasn't exactly, I did pick up some Arabic, but I wasn't fluent. So when I moved, after moving away from Oman, and I joined the International Islamic School in Malaysia because my parents have moved on to a different country. I had to move back to Malaysia, and I took Arabic as a subject there for IGCSEs. And from there, I actually started enjoying Arabic more, even though it was in a very exam-based setting, because now I can find native speakers and I can appreciate the language within, especially in an Islamic context, where you see where your understanding of the language benefits you directly, as opposed to an international school where Islam is not taught and you're learning the language just as a language. So that really spurred my pursuit for language and authenticity, in a sense where I tried to speak Arabic in the formal Arabic, because I thought back then that's the way Arabic was supposed to be spoken, learning the formal Arabic and speaking the formal Arabic with other people.
Yeah.
Then came Egypt, when I moved to Egypt after my GCSEs. 2 years of IGCSEs. In 2014, I moved to Egypt to do my IBs. The story changed. Now, I have some quite a good foundation in Arabic, but my Arabic, the so-called authentic Arabic, is not very useful. The Fusha is not useful. Why? Because the locals don't speak Fusha Arabic.
Yeah.
And Egypt is very well known for upholding its local dialect, the Ammiya, Lahga, Ammiya Masriya. And even the way that they pronounce certain letters are very different to the standard Arabic. And that even spills, exactly. It even spills over to their formal Arabic, where they would speak, the standard Arabic, but the jim is always a gim, this regardless of whether they are speaking Ammiya or Fusha. So, although I tried to pursue authenticity there, I found out that just speaking Fusha wasn't working. So I ended up learning the Ammiya in Egypt. And then I learned one thing, which a lesson for me is that just because it's colloquial, just because it's of the common people, doesn't mean it's not authentic. It's authentic in a different sense. It's in the real life sense that it is authentic. So I ended up even enjoying learning the Egyptian Arabic, even though Arabs in general, the Arabs that are non-Egyptian, often make fun of Egyptian Arabic, saying that this is a language, a dialect that people often joke about in the Arab world, but it's authentic for them, and this is the lateral language for them. I remember in Egypt, I learned enough Egyptian Arabic to be able to even volunteer and help teach English to kids from a set of kids from an orphanage in middle of Cairo, and teach them through the medium of Arabic, but using Egyptian Arabic. And I was able to do that. And I'm happy that I was able to be not just be understood, but I was still able to make an impact, So that mindset eventually helped carry me over to learn things like learn Japanese, where I would not just learn my journey with Japanese is that has always been a hobby of mine, just picking up bits and pieces of Japanese growing up since beginning of secondary school, and learning little bits, like first learning the hiragana, then the katakana, which are the two basic writing systems. And then I started trying my best to pick up kanji. You know kanji, right? The Chinese characters that are used in Japanese, and there are about 4,000 of them that I in regular use. I tried to pick them up and try to learn the strokes, but it was a very slow, painstaking process, and I didn't necessarily follow up my study in Japanese very well. But I did try to remain authentic by trying to listen to a lot of Japanese and to learn handwriting and that sort of thing.
What was it about Japanese that interested you? Like, was it just something that you were naturally exposed to and you just wanted to get it deeper, or was it because of anime?
It was because of anime. I mean, growing up as a kid, there's not much of a reason to get into anything Japanese because I was in an environment far removed from Japan. I moved to an Arab country, like who speaks Japanese there? But because of the influence of anime and how I ended up liking it, I decided, this is a cool language. I want to understand anime without subtitles. Let's go. And it began from there. And it began in secondary school, and that accumulated over time. And by the time I entered university, I could actually carry a very basic conversation. I had some understanding of Japanese grammar, but it was never formalized. It was little bits and pieces that I picked up, and from a little bit of my readings as well. But it was never like I knew the conjugations in this and that way. That's why in university, what really benefited me from Japanese is that structured way of understanding the language, which helped to improve my thought process when thinking in Japanese as well.
But you only got
and to become more fluent, to become more authentic in the way that I communicate in the language.
But you only got to formally learn Japanese for 1 year. Is that correct?
For 1.5 years. I wouldn't say, because a university year itself isn't even 1 year, right? So bring it all together, it's definitely just about 1 year and a bit.
So but it's interesting because I guess like just the cultural parallel that we're finding today is that I guess a lot of people now have that sort of interest, not in Japanese, whilst people are interested in Japanese, but I guess a lot of them are interested in Korean at this point, which is wild. That was really interesting. Where does Russian come into this?
Because I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, that's the thing. All of these languages, except for Japanese, but all of these languages are linked to the fact that I've lived in many different places around the world. Japanese is an outlier just because I picked it up without any connection to Japan. But Russia, I do have a connection with Russia because the reason that I moved to the International Islamic School in Malaysia was that my parents moved to Russia. And in that part of Russia, it's in the Russian Far East, in an island north of Japan, but not Japan. Island north of Japan is in Russia, called Sakhalin. It's an oil-producing place, so that's why my father got the job. And my parents moved there, but the nearest international school was inconveniently located in Japan. And it would be a hassle to set up accommodation and, that sort of paperwork for me to study IGCSEs, most importantly in Japan or in another country nearby Sakhalin. So made the decision to just move me back to Malaysia. I had a culture shock. I didn't necessarily like it at first because, I lived abroad for so many years and now I have to come back to the motherland and, get used to life in Malaysia. But then I got to live in Russia briefly during the holidays. So I ended up getting some exposure to the Russian language and I had to pick up some basic Russian to communicate with the locals there.
How does your siblings come into this? Did they have to move back to Malaysia to study, or did they manage to study back in Sakhalin?
They did manage to study back in Sakhalin, with the exception of my younger sister, who's number 2 in the family, because all of them back at that time were still in primary school, and there was an international primary school in Sakhalin in the same area as our housing over there. It's an expat housing area, and there was an international school. For secondary school, I had to move to Japan, if not back to Malaysia. So
that would have been cool.
That would have been cool, yeah. It would have been still a culture shock because then I would have been expecting a Japanese anime high school experience when it's not actually reality.
Waiting for one of those like girls to come up to you and go Taisuki. Maybe not, but it's. So now you've got Arabic, you've got English, you've got Malay, but not just Malay. You have proficiency over the Jawi script as well, which is something else. You've got Japanese, you've got Russian. Why do you do it? Is there anything that comes like? Is it a sense of appreciation for the language, for the culture? Where does the motivation to learn something comes from? To learn a language.
I believe it is appreciation and
honoring, I guess.
Honoring and embracing the fact that I live in these different countries and I'm enjoying these different environments and cultures that I live in. The only fair thing to do is for me to learn those languages and to, have a fun time doing so. And when it comes to Arabic especially, Arabic has a religious dynamic to it, right? The importance of Arabic for me is even more profound as I entered uni, actually, because I become more religiously aware about my obligations towards the faith, and but not ignoring all these other languages. They come at a time when I become so much more appreciative of those countries of where the language are from. There was a point in my life where I was so obsessed with everything Russian. Mm-hmm. Like I was not just learning the language, I was reading up on its history, on Russian history, Soviet history. I was fascinated with, all the different cultural oddities that they find in Russia and Ukraine and the Russian-speaking regions in general. And even thought about, here's the thing, a lecturing on something. I designed a form of the Russian alphabet to write Malay.
Okay, what does that mean?
So, the Russian alphabet.
Yeah, you have Cyrillic?
The Cyrillic alphabet. I designed a specific kind of Cyrillic alphabet that would be suitable for writing the Malay language, because there would be some consonants and vowels that don't necessarily jive between the two languages. But I use specific Cyrillic characters from other Cyrillic using languages for the Malay language, and voila, I created the Abjad Cyril Melayu.
Why?
Which, in my mind, in my imagination, would be co-official with the Jawi script in a form of in an alternate reality form of Malaysia.
Why haven't you advertised this? Maybe someone would be interested. Someone in the north of Japan that is looking to study Russian and Malay. I don't know if you're getting that. I'm being sarcastic, but I'm being sarcastic.
I did have a blog for it. I did blog about it and wrote about it too, but the blog has since closed, and it wasn't really because of anything controversial or whatever, but I decided to close the blog because it was an accumulation of thoughts and writings of when I was growing up, and it doesn't necessarily reflect of who I am now as a 22-year-old going to 23-year-old adult with a professional career and who needs a professional persona. So I decided to close it, and I guess if you dig deep enough, you could still find it, but it was there. I did write about it, and I still have it saved on my computer somewhere. But when it comes to this language fascination, I think one language you forget to mention is Indonesian, because Malay and Indonesian, they are sister languages, true, but to have fluency in Indonesian from Malaysian is actually a little bit more difficult, because we don't have so much exposure to Indonesian media, Indonesian language. So we try. There's a lot of vocabulary that the Indonesians use that we don't use as Malaysians. So I managed to read up on a lot of Indonesian, especially when I was in university. I read a lot of Indonesian articles, listened to Indonesian videos, especially Islamic videos, and then I picked up on the style of talking Indonesian as well. And early this year, I went to Jakarta. Alhamdulillah, I was able to make myself understood without it being too obvious that I am a Malaysian, because in Jakarta, Jakartans don't really adapt to the Malaysian style of speaking. But if we adapt to them, I consider it a very sign of respect towards their culture and region as a tourist.
I for one really admire someone that is as multilingual as you are. Like you are fluent in about 3-4 languages at this point. So it's obviously somewhere that I want to get to, especially with Arabic, and even to a point my Malay needs a lot of improvement as well, but it's slowly been improving. So yeah, I really admire it, and I really respect the amount of effort that you put into it, because I think what it does come down to is like, to take the time and effort to sit down and learn something, especially a medium of communication. It's the highest form of appreciation and the highest form of honor that you could give to a people and a culture. And especially talking about it in a religious sense, Arabic is the language of Islam. And I think if you really want to respect it to the level that you want to be able to derive its own teachings through your own framework, through your own mental framework, just saying through your mind, it's like the only way you could do it is by learning Arabic. And I really need to kind of sit down and reassess what my priorities are and whether that should be one of them. I think a lot of people will suffer from this. A lot of Muslims will suffer from the idea that they'll get to it at one point, but it won't be one point. You'll really have to sit down and make it a concerted, conscious effort to do it, which is a really difficult thing to do. I'm just saying that's cool. That's cool. I wanted to go back, take it back to work. You're working in, just as a way to kind of round off the discussion, because we've been going for an hour and a half and it really hasn't felt like it. Do you enjoy what you do?
Definitely. I do enjoy what I do. Yes, it does get tiring, and it can get like my work can become like a drag, and that it takes so much time and effort. But I feel like that's down to the fact that I'm learning and working at the same time. It's not just me working to execute the job. I'm also trying to find out the correct way or the right way of doing things while trying to deliver those results. So, that's why I end up taking a lot more time than other people possibly. Maybe that could also be because I have efficiency issues. I just have to become more efficient in the way that I work.
I wouldn't say that. I would say that you really want to understand something, like the principles of something, before you take action on it.
That's true. I do prefer understanding something that I'm working on rather than not. Yeah.
Kind of a dumb thing to say now that I realize it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was somewhere I was going with this, but I've completely forgotten. So, would you say that you enjoy working life more than you did university life? As in, like, it is a different stage of your life. High school was one, and then university is another, and this is the third, probably the longest stage of your life. And like,
Yes.
What's been your general impressions, general takeaways? Like, how are you finding it?
Well, working adult life, it's not for the faint-hearted.
Wow.
It is very easy to mess up, and for anything to happen, any negative thing to happen, for it to mess up and backfire on you in a very negative way. But in all those sorts of situations, especially as a working adult, what you have to do is manage the way you react to those negative instances. So, for example, during COVID in 2019, in 2020 COVID season now, a lot of people honest working people have lost their jobs. They have had pay cuts, and things are really not working out well. I'm affected by it too, but I won't necessarily disclose what happened. But it's not a lot of plans that I had in mind kind of went down the drain, and I had to reevaluate my options.
I think you and everyone else.
Sorry?
You and everyone else.
That's true. And yes, okay, so when you are faced with these problems, as a mature adult, what you should do is to not try to put the blame or to find people to blame, but to look at yourself and ask, okay, I'm facing this. What can I do to mitigate those negative effects? So you have to take steps A, steps B, steps C, plan them, and prioritize what you need to do. And this is basically real life problem solving, especially in things that can be a life or death situation in terms of decision making, is something that you don't really need to do while you're in a university environment, because there are safety nets out there. So yeah, it's not for the faint-hearted. It's to become more aware and more smart about life. It's something that I'm working on. I'm definitely not an expert at adulting. I am trying my best, working with the resources that I have and time that I have remaining from my work, and learning about and appreciating appreciating the fact that you're in this position, but there are people still worse off than you at this point in time, and that you should be very thankful for where you are, and that you should not put yourself and in the mindset of, oh, woe is me, I'm in such a terrible situation, my life is over, my life is screwed, whatever. No, you can't think like that. You have to think positive. And that's why to relate it back to your question about whether I enjoy this working life, yes, I do actually, because it's far more exciting. It's me making up what my life is going to be, me crafting my choices. And yeah, I know Allah is the one that, who has decided everything for me. But those decisions that Allah has decided for me, it's up to me to perform them. And I don't know what I'm going to decide on. So it's all down to that. It's the adventure. It's the journey of being, and eventually the end goal. We all know as Muslims what our end goal is to attain the pleasure of Allah and go to Jannah one day. And it's just about, where am I going to sail my boat to? How am I going to reach to that end point? Inshallah, in the bi'idhnillah ta'ala, to that end goal. And it's going to be a lot of stress, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. I'm just beginning the journey. There's so many things that I still haven't gone through, like marriage, new house, new car.
Inshallah.
Yeah, soon, inshallah. Making those, like, new house, new car, firstborn child. I haven't reached those milestones yet, but I know many people who have. So
what's your priorities at this point? Like, what are you wanting to do next?
Financial stability is the most in the short term, financial stability is the case. Yes.
What does that
It's
mean?
financial stability in the sense that I don't have to depend solely on my income as a consultant, as my revenues, as my source of cash flow.
Yeah, that's I guess that's a common misconception that people have in terms of, financial stability is only only stems from your income, which is quite a nice segue because I wanted to ask you more about investing. So what sort of things have you been able to do that kind of don't make your income your only, I guess your only source of support?
Yeah. So when it comes to investing, a lot of people have this misconception that investing is only for people with money, like people with substantial incomes, people with like wealth inherited from their rich parents. But it's not necessarily the case, because you can start investing with as little as RM1, right? And there are many platforms out there. And as a smart Muslim investor, you have to do a lot of reading in terms of knowing what is halal and haram first in investing, what is allowed in a transaction, what is allowed in investing in a company, what sort of companies are considered halal and haram. And the general principles are very easy to follow, actually. But when it comes to actually selecting the products you want to invest into, there are many apps out there, there are many stocks out there, and investment packages out there. But which one is it that is really Muslim friendly? Which one is it is Sharia compliant? Knowing that, then you can choose those investment options. And some of them you can invest as little as 10 ringgits, as little as 1 ringgit, as little as 100 ringgits. I use the term little very loosely here, but as a working person, you can usually save 100 ringgits for something like investment. So the reason why investment is so important is that you want to protect your wealth from the effect of inflation over time. So when your money is just saved inside the bank like that, nothing is going to help it hedge against the fact that your money is losing value over time, because everything is getting more expensive, because people are printing more money. So by putting your money into an investment, your money can be put into development of the country, development of companies, and produce goods, and you earn a little bit from that, and your money's value is reflected on something that is tangible. And it's not just money in itself. You see what I mean? So that's the whole purpose of investing, is so that your money isn't just sitting there doing nothing. It's your money has value because it's being purposed for an economic activity.
Practically, like, what have you done to further this? Because I'm really interested. I went down a rabbit hole today, like looking at all these, like, that app you sent me, Wahid Invest. I was like, wait, okay, Yasser Qadi is a spokesperson, Sulaiman Hani is a spokesperson. So I was like, really, like, should I do this? Should I do this? So what do you do?
Yeah, I participate in some of these investment apps. One of them being Wahid Invest. It's I recently found out about it myself, but what really attracted me to it was that, there is an American investment that is actually Sharia compliant. That is what? That's true, and I can actually do this for as little as 100 ringgits. I mean, that's such a it's so cool and clever, right? And then you don't even, the great thing about investing in Wahid Invest for me is that I don't have to rack my brains to decide, when I'm going to sell this, or I have to look at the newspaper and see all the stock timings and all that sort of thing, because that's the point of the robo-advisory. It helps select your portfolio for you and select which fund to allocate in what percentage, right? Mm-hmm. And that depending on the situation, they may allocate the percentage slightly differently over time in order for you to get the best returns on your investment. And then, of course, they make money from taking a slice of the profit from you as commission, as management fees. At the end of the day, you're still winning.
What sort of portfolio do you have?
I took out the very aggressive portfolio simply because the reason being is that I want the most exposure to the American stocks. Right? Because if you choose the other portfolios, your share of American stocks will actually be lower. So you have more exposure to Malaysian stocks or sukuk or gold. I believe aggressive has gold still, which, it could be a good thing if you have a lower risk appetite. But I would like to get that as much exposure to the American stocks because it's not an opportunity that I can get investing in other methods necessarily. Like if I want to invest in American stocks through the Bursa stock exchange, the Malaysian stock exchange, I would have to have a higher minimum investment first to start off, right? So
in terms of someone that is just starting off like me, obviously maybe you don't want to reveal exactly how much you put in there, but like what is some general principle? I mean, I guess starting off, like how much do you think I should begin with, and then what are some general principles I should use whilst utilizing the application?
Some general principles. Well, no, you can start off with 100. You can start off with the minimum. That is no issue. You can choose to top up whenever you feel like it, but doing a bit of reading, like about the news and seeing the economic situation in the US and Malaysia would help you to decide when is it a good time to top up and when is it a good time to withdraw your money. But when you're just starting out, don't be tempted to withdraw your money when you see a little bit of profit there, because you're only going to see a significant increase in any investment after some time. It's not just going to be after 2-3 days you're going to make millions. No, it doesn't work like that. And you can't. There's not a get rich quick scheme, Otherwise everyone would be rich. But when it comes to Wahid Invest or any investment instruments for that matter, the more you invest, the more profit you can make potentially. So if you start off with a higher initial investment, then for sure you're going to make more money, inshallah, if the climate is right. At the same time, another advice I give is not to be faced by slight dips and negative values in your investment, because the problem with that is that because you are, in the case of Wahid Invest, it's a fund. It's not exactly one stock you are investing in. You're investing in many stocks at once. So when it's underperforming for a couple of weeks, inshallah, it's gonna perform better in the future. So it's very tempting for you to just withdraw, thinking, "Oh, it's not gonna work. I'm just losing money." Give it some time, because if you check the performance of the fund, it has been on a positive trend. Yeah, so it's very much the case that it will continue to be on a positive trend with dips in between. So just think long term. Don't think short term. It's not a get rich quick scheme. It is you probably make significant gains, if not in a year, in several years. And don't use just one app. There are other means for you to invest your money in, and try to fully utilize that as much as possible.
What do you use? Because I'm really interested now, because my money has been in a bank for like a long time, and now I'm like, wait, I'm thinking differently. Well, I started off with the book that Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah.
It was I assume you've read it, right?
Yeah, I've read it. I've
And
not finished it, but I've listened to its audiobook and uh, read the physical book. I do have one. Yeah.
I felt like a lot of it, to be honest, was kind of like filler. But there were some some
Mhm.
like useful things, and if anything, it made me think
Yeah.
financially, which I guess is a benefit. So yeah, that's what started it. Okay, so yeah, give me advice. Like what, like what other things should I be doing, or
Do you
like what
have
other
tabung
apps should?
haji?
No, I do not.
You do not have tabung haji? I'm surprised.
Maybe maybe my parents made me one, but like I have no idea.
Okay, find out. Okay, my advice to Malaysian Muslims, and especially, oh, I'm running out of battery. Hold on.
All right, sorry. Is that your earphones or
Uh,
your laptop?
no, my computer. I just
Oh,
got the low battery message. Okay, to continue. Okay, as a Malaysian Muslim, you are eligible to open a Tabung Haji account, which is the investment scheme for you to grow your money to help you to go to Hajj. So in Malaysia, there is that investment scheme where the returns can be quite uh, significant if the economy performs well. And it's all Sharia compliant. They do the zakats for you. So it's a very good investment that you should not miss out on. So it's very liquid as well. You can withdraw your money whenever, almost instantly. If you have a Bank Islam account or a Maybank account linked to your Tabung Haji, you can withdraw your money like as if it's a bank. But
mm,
withdrawing your money means that you're withdrawing out of your investment. So
yeah.
just keep that in mind. So check with your parents whether they've opened for you your Tabung Haji and start putting your money in there. It can give you very good returns. I can't remember how much specifically, but when I mean very good, I mean it in the loose sense where they do the zakahs for you and you know that it's fully Sharia compliant.
In terms of you, had your parents already set one up for you and you just inherited control of it, or what was?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Mm. Okay, what other things then, other than documentary?
Other than Tabung Haji, think about EPF. Have you opened an EPF account yet?
No, I have not, sir.
Oh, okay. Soon enough when you graduate, you'll be asked to open an EPF account.
Yeah.
But since you're already freelancing, right? You can begin making EPF contributions yourself from your own will. Like EPF is basically Employee Provident Fund. EPF. Yep. So what happens is that the government has mandated you to allocate a certain percentage of your money, of your pay, once you work in a company, to go specifically to your EPF account. This money will be invested for the purpose of your retirement.
Okay.
Yeah. And you can only withdraw it once you reach the age of 55.
Okay.
And this is mandated by law, meaning that every month a cut of your pay will be dedicated to your EPF account and you cannot withdraw it and except for certain circumstances. And your employer also has to contribute to your EPF. This employer's contribution to your EPF will be slightly bigger than your own contribution, but your employer's contribution is separate from your pay. So it's determined by your pay, but it's separate from your pay. So it's not counted as part of your pay. But this will go directly into your EPF account too.
Okay.
So you're winning because now this money is going to be invested. And inshallah, by the time you're 55, that money will be worth a lot more because
Yeah.
it's being invested rather than just sitting in a bank somewhere. So
Okay.
open an EPF account in advance so that you don't have to go through the hassle when you actually have a job. And if you accumulate enough money there, you can actually start making investments directly using the EPF money you have in there to make other investments. Like not just the investments that EPF makes in itself, but you can choose which other sorts of investments, unit trusts, stocks or whatever, to invest your EPF money into to make even more profit, to make even more dividend than you are earning using EPF by default.
Okay, that's left me quite a lot to think about. EPF, Tapung Haji, Wahid Invest. Bro, always making money without actually having to work. I wonder how EPF would work as a freelancer that doesn't necessarily get consistent amounts of income, though. I'd have to look into that.
That's something you can ask the EPF guys. How would a freelancer be responsible for EPF? Because EPF reporting can be very important for things like loan applications or government applications for benefits and things like that, or getting grants and certain things. They require that certain documentation. So you wouldn't want to miss out on that.
So this is part of your plan in terms of getting financially stable. It's like you are getting income from different things. So in Tabung Haji, EPF, investing. What does financial stability look like in terms of, is it that your passive income covers all your expenses?
Yeah.
Okay. And then your income is just completely separate from that.
And my main income can be reinvested into investment.
Oh, this is like, sorry, I'm still at a stage where all this is like blowing my mind. I think that's one of the philosophies in Rich Dad Poor Dad as well. Is like, think like a rich person. So that's pretty cool. What other applications would you suggest? I
can recommend you this Facebook group. I can share the link with you later, where you can find out all the different sorts of applications that a lot of people pursue to earn passive income. But don't limit yourself to only using applications and things of that sort. There are other physical means like to make passive income, and among them is real estate. And I can't emphasize it enough. When you have enough capital, if you build houses and you have land and you build houses that you rent out to other people on that land, you can make significant amounts of money. And you should definitely keep that in mind in terms of your wealth planning, I believe. I mean, it's not something it's in the short term that I can do myself, but it's something I definitely want to look into. Because really they do make a lot of money, especially if your land is in a very lucrative area, like KL area. Those people who've already bought land here, like they are making a lot of money from rents, or even land sales. By default, some of the land plots would be just 1 million ringgits, despite not having anything on it.
Okay, bro, I think it's been quite a long call, and it's probably a good place for us to round it off. You've left me. It's been like an absolute pleasure, and you've left me with quite a lot to think about, especially about investing, which is something not a lot. I think there's sort of like a kind of like a conception that it's a very risky and you need to be savvy to do it. And in this current climate, it's not really the case in terms of like the amount of apps that are available, and it's actually quite easy once you think about it. So again, Barakallah Feek for taking the time to talk to me, and I appreciate it's a large amount of your day, and I don't take it for granted, not to you nor for anyone. So again, Jazakallah khair. May Allah increase you in all that is good. I feel like I'm probably going to have you on at some point, because when I get into start working again, I'm going to be like, give me some advice, please. I hope that you've enjoyed this as much as I have, genuinely.
I genuinely have. Jazakallah khairan, barakallah feek, and I really, really appreciate you having me here.
No worries, bro. Yalla, take care then. I'll leave you alone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.